Choosing the right deck is very important, but what many people don't put as much effort into is choosing the right tech cards to play in that deck. If you fill your deck with the wrong staples, you set yourself up for failure almost way worse than if you picked the wrong deck. So today I'm going to show you guys what I believe to be the strongest staples in this format. We're going to do a tier list breaking down the best main deck staples, side deck staples, and what cards I'd avoid altogether. So those who are trying to up their game, pay close attention. Now, before we get into the breakdown of the tiers, if you enjoy the tier list and discussion content, please make sure to like and subscribe, as well as comment down below any of your opinions on the format, whether it be predictions of what I may say or reflections afterwards if you disagree or agree with any of my talking points. You know, this is obviously just one perspective, and I've been mostly a Dracotel player. That being said, I do feel like I have a lot to say about the other decks too, and how staples interact with them and against them. So it's not going to be just a Dracotel's staple guide. So I'm going to do this sort of category by category in terms of the staples here. Let's start off with hand traps, and less broadly, let's start off with the ghost girls. So I only have 4 ghost girls even on this list today. In past tier lists, I've rambled on for about an hour and a half discussing every single staple that exists within Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't want to do that anymore because that takes forever, and so many of the cards end up in the avoid section. So first up, we got everyone's favorite, the most iconic, Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. This card is a card that has been at the precipice of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Essentially since its release, barring maybe a couple formats like tier. And this format is no different. Ash Blossom is a very solid card right now. There are points in time where Ash does kind of wane in sort of value, for example around Malice. The existence of Charmies though means that, like in OCG and Master Duel formats, Ash will always sort of be played as a counter to those cards at the very least. But furthermore, Ash does have actual implications in the metagame. It's effective versus the Dracotel trap cards, can be used to stop the Dracotel spell cards, can have Branded Fusion, all important, as well as versus other decks, you can hit cards like Cupsy, which is important, both the Synchron Effect monster. You can hit the Mitsurugi cards to search to get started, or in the grave to stop them from reviving. While Ash Blossom may lose versatility from format to format, this is certainly not the case here, and the card does stand as a premium card of this format, which it is one of the best main deck staples, and is something that I would probably never even consider citing out, maybe except against Malice. Moving on to the next Ghost Girl, we got Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion. So Ghost Belle is an interesting one. It's one that's ping-ponged around main deckable to side deckable to maybe it's good or bad. Obviously across its existence, it's been very erratic in terms of playability because it depends on the type of engines and support cards that are being played. That being said, right now, Belle does have key targets that hits in the format. You can hit the Yummy Synchros effect to return back. You can hit cards like Pre-Preparation Rites. You can affect the Revive effect like Ash does. You can hit the Dracotel traps, which are important. You can do a lot of things that make it pretty good. However, its inability to hit the Mulcharmies and a little bit less flexible than Ash, which in my mind makes it a card that is similar to Ash, but a bit worse. Depending on where we are in the format, it's weird. This card is either one of the best side deck cards or an okay or one of the best main deck cards. Right now, we seem to be trending towards more of the best main deck position because Dracotel has had an uptick in a resurgency to be the most popular and dominant deck. However, that can change within a week or two as Yami or Mitsu sort of retakes over the fold. This matters to me because I think there's about 3 or 4 cards that are interchangeable depending if you want to main deck them or side them, focusing down either Dracotel or the Yami and Mitsu decks. This is relevant because I feel like a lot of the best non-engine either isn't playable or there isn't enough of them. You need to find these sort of tertiary best engine or non-engine cards to fill out the deck. And Belle falls into this category for me. It's not broken, but it does have clear uses, and you want it going first in matchups like against Yami and Mitsu. It's fine going second against Mitsu, and specifically you want it against Dracotel going second. Yeah, if I was expecting more Yami Mitsu, this would end up in my side deck. So because of that, I'm including this and the other cards that are going to be similar to it. The other 2 cards, I'll mention those when I get to them, in the best side deck options. Do note though that depending on the tournament and in your current place in time, you may choose to main any number of these cards depending on what you're preparing for. Next up, we got Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, a card which I looked decently fondly on in my last tier list video, as I felt like it was pretty decent at hitting the Vanquish Soul cards as well as Canine Lupus. Now, on Canine VS still exists, and if anything, may see a little more play now because of Dracotel's presence. It's definitely not the deck to beat anymore. Now we're definitely shifting the aim of the staples towards Dracotel and Yumi and Mitsu. Those are the things that your non-engine should be the most effective against. Ghost Ogre in those cases is not great. Ghost Ogre is usable versus Yummy, but it's not brilliant. As well as if Arclight is already set up, you can't even Ghost Ogre the Snatchy, so it requires you to already deal with that threat first, which obviously not super ideal. And then versus Drake, the card is effectively useless. So all in all, Ghost Ogre to me feels like a card at avoid right now, as there are many other choices that do the same thing but better, and it has range of choices of things to do with it really isn't that high. This is not taking the same approach as trying to beat Ripper, so unless that's how the format sort of reimagines itself, Ogre is a card I'd avoid. The last Ghost Girl I have on this list is Ghost Mourner. I've decided not to include Reaper or Dogwood. Those are just not worth talking about. Ghost Mourner is one that has seen a little bit of discussion around it, as it's a sort of Dracotale counter you can play in the side deck that's also broad for other decks. Main decking it can be kind of weird, because if you main deck it, it's not going to do much versus Yummy. In fact, it does effectively nothing, and versus Mitsu, it doesn't do much either. Reverse Dracotale hitting Arthalion can be good enough value that makes Mourner worth it, especially if you need extra hand traps beyond the best few. So decks that have higher non-engine counts, or 60 card decks that need more hand traps to average out densities and ratios. Mourner can also kind of make up some of that ground, where it's better for some of the rogue decks like the Canine strategy. So Canine VS, it's whatever against, but Canine Crystron more specifically, because you can hit some of the more impactful cards or force the Ripper out. And I guess you can argue Ogre does the same, but at least Mourner has that main applicability versus Dracotale that makes it an okay side staple. This card wouldn't be high on the list anyways. I mean, this is the bottom of the list, okay side staple. Like, there is a reason to play it, but you need to understand exactly why you want to play it and make sure it fits that need specifically. Okay, moving on from the Ghost Girls, we reach the Mulcharmies. These cards have dominated the competitive landscape since their release. So where do they fall now? First up, Fualos. This card, should be no surprise, is one of the best cards in the game right now, if not one of the best, if not the best card. It truly does so much when you go second with it. You feel so comfortable, and that's why Ash is so important as well. You feel like you need to stop it. And if you need to tell for how this kind of plays out, just look at the YCS in Pittsburgh. Look at how often Aditya drew Fua going second, and the sort of overwhelming presence it had onto the game. There's no card to give you a better shot going second than Fua right now. Even versus decks that Fua may not be excellent against, like Dracotale, it does slow down a bit of their plays, and it replaces itself at the very least. It feels like Maxi in those spots. May not be as broken, maybe more balanced. The card is nuts, and I wouldn't surprise me if one day this card gets hit, because it is truly insane. But how do the other Mulcharmies fare? How about Parulia? So Parulia is one that is an okay side staple right now, but it's at the top of the okay side staples, in my opinion, so I had to move this around, I guess it'd be like this. Why do I place it here? There are less some from hand decks at the top metagame right now. Versus Yummy Mitsurugi, for example, Parulia on that engine sometimes lets you 0 draw, sometimes 1, sometimes 2, rarely more than that, meaning it's not trading super favorably into that matchup, and it can't be the sole reason for playing this card. As well as when you play it against the Dracotale deck, it does 1 draw or nothing. It's a card you should avoid signing in that matchup. It is okay against Malice, which is a deck that is increasing in popularity. It's mostly good against Canine strategies, because most of that stuff comes from the hand, as well as versus the Sulfachord versions of the Yummy decks or Sulfachord decks in general, because obviously pen cards and that summons from the hand as well. Those decks though aren't the top dogs or the most popular decks right now, so trying to focus and build solely around those feels a little bit of a mistake. If your side deck needs things to fill out those matchups, then Parulia is one of your best options, but if that's not one of the key things you're trying to target down, then I wouldn't warrant Parulia with the time. This should not be your answer to Mitsurugi Yummy, but it can be okay to put in if you're already playing Parulia. Next up is Meowls. So Meowls is one that I actually main decked at YCS Pittsburgh and at YCS Brazil, and it's a card I've liked a lot right now. It's felt almost as good as Fualos going second against the Yummy variants and Mitsurugi variants. While something I was skeptical on, I do think this card's actually one of the best side deck staples. This is one of the cards like Bell that if the format is right is a main deck option. It depends on your deck obviously to some degree too, but if you're expecting mostly Yummy and Mitsu variants, then Meowls definitely has a place, something to force them to end on a half field while also accruing your resources to break through said half field. It feels like what Maxi I guess is intended to do in these cases. Next up is that Sagil Lockbird, and this is the third card in that trio of 3 hand traps that I think are all very strong in specific matchups, but have their faults. So Droll is very good against search decks, Mitsurugi decks specifically, Sulfachord engines, and can be okay in some positions versus Yummy. Or Dracotale, however, it is pretty bad. It oftentimes does nothing. Sometimes it stops a Key2 or a Lucius, but it's not a card that I would ever expect to do anything. I decided out in every instance versus the Dracotale deck. Continuing on with the sort of generic hand traps, Effect Veiler. Effect Veiler, obviously one that I played on the Dracotale deck in its first iteration back in Vancouver. Again, that was built for Vanquish Soul Canine. Right now, it fills a very similar niche into Ghost Mourner. It's effective against Arthlion sometimes, not all the time though. It's decent against canine strategies, but it's not good against Yumi or Mitsu in my opinion. So because of that, I would never main deck this card. There's too much of a risk attached to it, and it's not like insane versus any of the things I just mentioned either. So it sits near Mourner at the bottom of okay staples. Next up is Imperm. Imperm obviously feels similar to this, but I'm going to move it up to an okay main staple for a bit of a different reason. Its flexibility to be able to use on your own turn, as well as it not being a monster effect, give it two big edges. The first one being you can decide not to use it to stop Mitsu and Yumi. Instead, depending on how they end their field or the other cards in your hand, you can use it as a breaker in the same way Bell and Ash can be used. You can imperm their snatching the draw phase. It can't fuse or not fuse, synchro away. You can imperm Herald the Arclight to turn off the negate. You can imperm an IP Masquerade to stop that disruption. It softens up their field. It has a tangible effect where Veiler and Mourner can do almost nothing. Imperm also is better versus the VS and K9 decks because it doesn't trigger Azuna and Ripper's bonus effect, something that directly is an issue with Mourner and Veiler. Those cards obviously are monsters, so they are better for Dracotale specifically, but Imperm I think is by far and away the better card in this position. So if you're looking for another staple to main deck, Imperm is fine. It's not going to blow away your opponents either in terms of power and impact on the game state like the higher rated hand traps right now, but it is definitely not to the same degree of mediocrity that Mourner and Veiler are. Next up is Canine Azuna. So Azuna for me is an okay main deck staple. It is seeing a little bit of an uptick in popularity again because of Dracotale. It is very solid with Dracotale to be able to make an untargetable Ripper as well as threaten an untargetable Zeus. However, the thing with doing that is it means that you're going to have Rippers versus Yumi cards, which Yumi's entire claim to fame months ago was that it was good into the canine pieces. This feels weird to me. I don't like side decking these cards either because they do take a lot of space. Maybe this ends up being just a better side spot for Dracotale specifically, but for me, this one falls into a little bit of this weird zone where it's I'm sort of undecided on how I feel about it. If it's something I want to main deck, side deck, how high up it is. Some games it can be incredibly powerful. Some games it gets ogred, it gets crowed, it gets belled. I mean, the Lupus does whatever, and they or Fallen Virtuous the Lupus, and it just ends up kind of being a nothing burger where it got countered too easily, and it wasn't worth all the space that you commit towards it. Card is not unplayable, but it's also not brilliant either right now, because if there's anything I'm a little unsure about in terms of its placing, it might be the Azuna. Next up is Bystial, Magnamut. So in past I've kind of split up the Bystials into separate categories and then had like Druisworm and Magnamut not always in the same place, but I think that's a little stupid the more I think about it, because trying to compare Magnamut to being a better card because of Search's engine pieces doesn't really feel like it accurately represents the state of non-engine. I'm liking this card in Dracotale right now as an engine card, not as non-engine. So me saying I like it as non-engine because of that feels stupid. I actually have to value the Bystial effect here. So how valuable is the Bystial effect here? I know that AD did just win the YCS with it, and it seems like that's a reason to like it, but I found these cards to be very lackluster. They have uses versus a lot of decks, but they're just okay. Where they thrive is against Branded, which is upticked a little bit, and grind games versus Mitsurugi. They definitely do have uses. They're okay and can be worth siding, but they're not backbreaking. They're not going to open the game up entirely, nor do they hit every deck equally. So they're okay side staples for now. Next up is Nibiru the Primal, being a card which is oftentimes topped the list as one of the most important cards in the game. And I think for a bit of a rarity right now, it is near the bottom of that list. It feels like a lot of decks don't play into it. Yamimitsu has ways around it or ways to mitigate it so that it doesn't feel like it's entirely game ending. Mitsurugi cards don't really care about Nibiru too much. It may stop cards like IP, but that's like it. Dracotale cares almost nothing about it. So yeah, Nibiru feels like oftentimes it's better used as torrential tribute when you go first to back up other negations. But even when you pair it with like an Imperm or Veiler in this format, because of how bad the other cards are, Nibiru just doesn't kind of jive properly. Its best use is to be paired with other hand traps against Yamimitsu, but it can still struggle into the Murakumo grind games later, and there usually are better options. That being said though, when you're pairing it alongside the Charmies is when it can be the best, because it forces opponents to give you more draws, especially if they're going for like half fields and not just passing altogether. As well as when you go first, it is still very strong. So this card is not useless by any means. It's just I would not auto-include it in every deck. I'd be more critical for each decision, and if you need some more hand traps, then Nibiru is a fine inclusion, but it's not topping the list either. It's just an okay main deck staple. Next up, let's talk about the Dominus cards. So Dominus Purge, I think, is one of the best main deck staples. Same with Impulse. Okay, why? Why am I putting both of these at the top of this list here? And it's because Battle and Ash are so good, right? These cards feel almost like the Bizarro forms in the same thing. I mean, obviously not the exact same. You have the ability to stop all this interaction from the graveyard. Thanks to Purge and Impulse, you can stop the effects of the Revive and Prayers off Murakumo. With Purge, you can Purge stop Dracotale traps, really important to push through fields. You can stop their starters by hitting Key 2. or Lucius. You can hit the Arclight effect to search. They can't do whatever. You can hit the Saj, hit the pre-prep. Yeah, I mean, the card is obviously very good. Impulse similarly hits a lot of the same cards, or can hit the fusion spells to deny their capacity in that way. You can hit 5 mana. Impulse is a very strong card. Both these cards are really, really relevant right now. Biggest thing is you do take pretty big hits to your deck to be forced to play a pure strategy to play either of these. Not every deck can afford to play them, but if you can afford to play them, these are sort of no-brainers in my opinion to play. That's why we even saw the Primite Odeon deck win that YCS in France. The Dominus cards were premium hand traps. He decided to just say it was worth the risk and play them. Songs the Dominator, on the other hand, not one I feel the same about. It is more Effect Negation, which is kind of met right now, and the cost attached to it is pretty high. That being said, if you can afford it, it's similar to Imperm, so it's just an okay main deck staple. Moving on, we got Dimension Shifter. This one needs no introduction. You can see my report from YCS Anaheim, where I complained and bitched after getting shifted twice. Yeah, this is still one of the best cards. You can play, you should. After that, we got DD Crow, Dimension Shifter's little brother. And when I say little, I mean much, much, much littler. And this isn't a card that I think is very impactful right now. When you think of what I want to use it against, it's like a Bystial, but you lose the body, which is massively important right now. Anything I'd want to hit a Bystial would just do better, so I think this card just kind of falls into this section and avoid. Next up, we got Vados. I love this card. One day this will be meta, I promise, but today is not the day. Field spells aren't important enough for Vados to be relevant, so we are in avoid. It's all the same. Next up, we're on to Retaliating Seed, the Cockroach. This card is once again having its time to shine. It is one of the best side deck staples for Dracotail. Being able to chain it into response to a fusion spell is game breaking, and as a result, it is a big card that Dracotail players will play around as they're mapping out their turn 1 play and even their side decks. Retaliating Seed is very powerful. Your deck has to be able to play it. That's really all I'd use it against them. Next up is Artifact Lancia. So Lancia is very, very, very good versus one deck and one deck only. And that is Malice. But because we have seen an uptick in Malice right now, I am putting it in an okay side deck section. I would only play this if you want something from Malice. That's all you have to know. Nothing's changed. Next up, Contact Sea. This is an interesting one. This card is another okay side deck staple for me. I don't love this card. I've never been a big fan. I recognize there are game states where it can matter. Sometimes versus a Dracotail, there's not a good way to fuse it away. Furthermore, against Yami, sometimes they don't have the links to send it away either. So it can clog up their field, and if you catch some of the right spot, can be an absolutely game-breaking thing. Because it sometimes can be a little more conditional, it's oftentimes not my go-to strategy for side decking. And our final hand trap is Phantasme the Fantastical Dragon. So Phantasme is a hand trap that I liked a lot last format. I thought it was decent draw into Nibiru and such against Vanquish Soul, and was solid versus Yami. I still think it is solid versus Yami, but the problem is when you're comparing it like against cards like Meowls, Droll, or Perulia versus something depending on the variant, and even some of the breakers like Dark Ruler and Zero Poly, I wonder, like, is Phantasme better than those cards? It has its place, but I'm not sure it does. Phantasme is a solid card. I wouldn't gloss over it entirely, but it is not the epitome of power that it kind of felt like it was a couple months ago. Good card. It's an okay side deck staple, but don't rush to include it either. Don't feel like you have to. It's not mandatory. But that brings us on to our breakers. So there are a lot of breakers, so I'm going to be going over ones that I feel like cover enough ground. Let's go with Dominus to Pankratops first. This is a card I will happily avoid for the time being. I know some people are playing it as a going second option to cards like Arclight and Dimensional Fissure. I think as though these hand traps or these disruptions usually backed with the other disruptions. They're backed up with things like Counter Trap and Mitsurugi Purification, for example. And when it's happening, Pankratops really does not actually do its job. I feel like it's wishful thinking to assume this does what you need it to. You need to soften the field first for it to be effective. In other cases, other cards can do the job better anyways. So to me, Pankratops feels like a bit of a misguided attempt at solving a problem with the deck. It doesn't actually do what it's supposed to do, and because of that, I just avoid it. This may be the hottest take in here, but I think this card is not good right now. Similarly, this Fenrir. Fenrir is the same sort of thing, except people are using this card a lot to go first as a generic sort of side deck option. You can put in going first, and then it, stops cards like Retaliating Sea. It can just be a decent going first card. It can hit Azuna. But here's the truth of the matter. It doesn't do any of those things that good. It's okay at what it does in every regard. It can oftentimes just do nothing. I feel like you're better off focusing on other higher impact cards, even if they are broad, more like Solemns than you are for Fenrirs. And if you're trying to use Fenrir going second, there really is almost an application I wanted. I don't really want it going second in Dracotail. I don't want it going second in Mitsurugi. Into Yami, it's going second. Fenrir is just not worthwhile at the moment, and it's a card I would avoid despite its recent success at some of these events. Next up, we got the more spell-based breakers. The first one is Dark Ruler No More, a card which, if you asked me a week or two ago, probably would have been higher on this list. But as this card has gained popularity to beat Yamimitsu, firstly, Yamimitsu has fallen off a little bit, which could make this card better, to be honest, as Yamimitsu may prop itself back up. But also, Yamimitsu knows that it's there, and other Yami decks as well. so they play more cards for it. So they make the deck a little bit worse consistency-wise to play cards like Purification in the main deck to make sure Dark Ruler in the main deck doesn't just screw them. Furthermore, it means that other pure Yummy variants can play the Silhouette Rabbit combination with the Apophis cards to play on Dark Ruler. And this makes the Dark Ruler and Regeki type cards way worse right now. However, this card is still good enough in these situations that I think it does warrant play. You can sometimes force the counter trap, force the negate, or prevent that one search. The Dark Ruler can be pretty big in those cases, as well as it's decent in other positions too. If there's any breaker that hits monsters I think is worthwhile, it's this and one other one I'll get to later. But yeah, if that's saying something, I don't think these monster breakers are very good right now. Raigeki, yeah, is a card I'd avoid. The breakers are low right now because the Mitsu Yami deck plays around it too well, and Pure Yami has adapted to be Dark Ruler, by virtue is also better against Raigeki. Or to, yeah, I would not put much effort into playing Raigeki. It's not worthwhile. Next up, another breaker is Change of Heart, another card I'd avoid. Similarly, it doesn't do enough to really impact the game. But what is relevant with Change of Heart is that it targets. It's actually a bad thing because most decks can play on targeting very easily. You can fuse away, obviously, in Draco Tail. You can synchro away or tag out. And Yami, contribute away with Mitsurugi. Targeting in general right now is definitely worse, and Change of Heart as a result is even worse than Raigeki. Evenly matched, similar sort of thing. Now, there are more back row in the format, so this can hit you more meaningful things. The problem is, though, this costs you a battle phase, so it really has to be worthwhile. I mean, Dark Ruler, you can argue, is the same, but I feel like Dark Ruler's not trying to go after Draco Tail, when people are trying to go after Draco Tail evenly. And that means guaranteeing a grind game versus Draco Tail, which is not something I'd be thrilled about doing, especially because they all but guarantee a 5 mana in their hand for that main phase 2 anyways. So it's not like you're entirely crippling their defenses. They should still have a lot of stuff going on. And because that evenly matches a card I would just avoid. Next up, we got Lightning Storm. So some back row removal. Now, how important is back row removal? It's not massively important, but I think these are okay cards to side. But yes, I'll move Dust to here as well, because the main purpose of these is going to be acting as spell and trap removal, not as monster removal here. We already saw bad monster removal is. The idea here is that decks do have a lot of back row, and you can force out these Omni Negates to work in tandem alongside other breakers to actually be effective. They also are better alongside your engine, but it can also hit floodgates like Dimensional Fissure and maybe some other continuous cards that are impactful. So the versatility on these and the fact they can pressure out like the Draco Tail traps make these much more meaningful than the other board breakers. That being said, board breakers right now that just strictly remove cards in the field aren't the best, as so many effects happen in the grave and are good in a grind game. And then this whole removal section is going to be kind of low on the list in comparison to other formats. Next up, we got Metatronus, a card that Triff used in order to win his YCS in Lima. Now, he made this card out to be really good, but the more I've tested it and watched people play, I don't think this card is that strong. Where Triff thrived with it was against Arclight, against Pure Yummy. He'd summon their Arclights and be able to search Mitsu cards, and it would beat the Arclight and access Mitsu all in one. That is very good in an ideal world. However, if you do that against the Yummy Mitsu player, they should have enough enough disruption still to still beat you despite this, as well as it's bad into Droll, and Droll is popular right now, as well as it still loses to the trap-based disruption like this Purifications and Silhouette Rabbits that exist in his other decks. With that in mind, the world and role in which this deck existed and thrived isn't the format we find ourselves in right now. If Pure Yummy was everywhere and you were playing Mitsu Yummy, I do think that specific situation allows this card to be playable. But unless that scenario kind of reoccurs, this doesn't have a place at the top of the food chain right now, and it's a card I'd avoid. Another breaker in quick play spell form, it is Super Polymerization, a card which I've main decked a couple times in this last few months now. I've side decked as well. It's one of the best ways of dealing with Herald the Arclight, as it can't be protected by other sort of negations like Purification. It doesn't require the battle phase, and it doesn't have problems when you go first with it. You can obviously set it, and it's a good card. The discard, though, can be hefty, and it does take up extra deck spaces, as well as new cards may make it a little more obsolete, as the new cards arguably do it better. It's a little wish-washy in its matchups. It's good versus Arclight and Yummy variants, but it's just okay versus Mitsu, and it's just okay against Draco Tail. So for me, it's a card that can fit either as an okay side deck staple or as an okay main deck staple. But I think if you're going to play it, I'd probably main deck it because it is usable, at least versus everything, and does excel in one matchup. Not a bad card by any means, but I think other cards may be edging it out in terms of playability. Next up, let's got Double Cyclone. Double Cyclone, to me, is one of the best side deck staples right now. People haven't given it enough credits, but the reason here is specifically how it interacts with the Draco Tail Flame. As a Draco Tail player, if my opponent uses this against me, this sucks deck. Pause. The flame is used on a spell, and then you chain the Double Cyclone, targeting this spell, and then another trap. Now you pop out the trap and your spell, and the spell resolves because no longer on the field to be negated by flame. This also works against Drill Beam for what it's worth, but yeah, Double Cyclone excels in that spot. It's very simple, but it does its job. Next up is Forbidden Droplet in a similar vein. This can be used like Double Cyclone to force your spells through Dracotail Flame or Drill Beams, as well as can be used for negation on general monsters and such. Here's the thing though, against Dracotail specifically, that application is worse because you'd rather pop a back row than negate a monster effect. As well versus other decks, it may not always be live because Arclight may prevent you from sending monsters from your hand to the grave. Where does Droplet then lie in terms of its playability? For me, it's an okay main deck staple. It does have uses across the board. It's not as single target as Double Cyclone, but it's not as effective in any one of those things like Double Cyclone is or other more targeted breakers or going first cards. Next up for the quick play spells, we got good old Called by the Grave, everyone's favorite broken quick play spell. At times this card fluctuates from being just an okay card to a side deck staple to a main deck staple. Right now this is one of the best main deck staples or side deck staples. It does kind of float between. I'm gonna put this in main deck staples for now because it is pretty broad use, but for this card to sit at the top here, it has to not only be good going first against the obvious uses like Ash and Fua, but also good going second against engines. I think it can be good going second because you can hit cards like Yummy Snatching and Grave to turn off plays. You have Mitsurugi cards in the grave, which can be really important. You can hit Phimeta or other Dracotail cards in the grave, and that's obviously useful too. So because of that, Call By does have applications going first and second and is worthwhile to consider as a main deck staple. Next up is Crossout. Crossout, non-engine doesn't seem powerful enough right now to warrant being main decked unless you're playing, I think, a Yummy or Mitsu deck, but it is still a strong card to side deck when you go first, so it is just an okay side deck staple. For the classic uses, I'm not going to go much more in depth than that. Next up, we got our triple tactics cards, so Talents and Thrust. Because Joel is everywhere, I think Thrust is a little worse off right now, but it is a powerful extender into the mid-rangey fields of Pure Yummy and Dracotail. It oftentimes falls short though on the higher ceiling decks like Canine Crystron and against Yummy Mitsurugi. So it's not a brilliant must-include type of card, but it is an okay main deck staple because it has utility. It also can be an okay side deck staple or ability to search Floodgates. Talents, on the other hand, is one of the best main deck staples. It's one of the cards that lets you cope under getting Fua and Droll the best, as well as in, you know, these grind games when you're going second, if you're able to Fua them, getting them to a half field. Talents is the card that can be a huge swing in resources. So I'm a big fan of Talents in this format, except in Dracotail because you have no links. In other decks, I think this card is definitely worthwhile to play because this interaction heavy format and the draw two or the steal or the hand rip all be very game winning by itself. Lastly, we got one more quick play spell to go over, and it's the brand new Fallen and the Virtuous. For me, this is an okay main deck staple. Why is it just an okay main deck staple? Well, I know I main decked this at the YCS in Pittsburgh, but it really isn't brilliant of a card. The reason to play it is in that deck is you have the extra synergy with Branded, even though it acts like a staple most of the time, and why it's even on this list. It is nice that you can hit your own card, so you can dodge Dracotail Flame with it, or you can go after theirs to hit like a Herald of the Arclight. So in some ways it can feel similar to Droplet, where it can do this dual purpose thing, which does so a little bit differently because it's doing one or the other, not both. And then the ability to search a second copy of itself means that if you have the extra space, you can get a lot of value out of it and convert it into multiple disruptions in the future. It is definitely an interesting card that has potential to be a powerful staple in future metas, and it has uses right now, so it's not an unplayable card and you can consider it in the main deck, but it's not a game breaking either. It's not going to solo a game by itself. It's not going to be the reason you win. It's going to have to be alongside other things working together that it really shines. And that wraps up the board breakers. If I missed any, then let me know, but for now assume that anything not here is a card I would avoid. Next up, we got some Floodgates going first cards. Gravekeeper's Inscription. It's a card that really hasn't seen much play in the last little bit, and it's weird for me because I put this card as one of the best side deck options before. I'll put it there again because it doesn't suit the decks that I'm playing, so I never had a chance to play it, but to me, in theory, this card seems like it should be powerful. Call monster effects in the grave, first or second of Dracotail, is going to be meaningful, and stopping reviving effects is also going to be good. The same way that Meowls is very strong. So to me, this has the makings of a very powerful card, and I think this hasn't been explored enough. Next up is Mistaken Arrest. So I know Droll and Lockbird is sitting as one of the best side deck staples for stopping searching, but Mistaken Arrest is only usable going first, not going second. So immediately it's worse than Droll. And there's a lot of going first cards you can put in versus Yummy Mitsu to beat it anyways. But unlike other cards, Mistaken Arrest isn't good versus other decks right now. Versus Dracotail and such, I'd rather want other options. Which is an okay side staple that I'd probably lean against playing, although it definitely has its uses, so not a card I'd straight up avoid. And that brings me to the card I would rather play in most cases, Different Dimension Ground. Obviously, banish every monster going to grave for the turn. Very powerful, good thrust target, good versus Dracotail, good versus Yummy decks. So yeah, I think it is one of the best side deck options if you want something going first that is tempo driven. Speaking of tempo driven cards, we do have the Blackout Laughs. So Blackout Laughs was good in broad cases and it was okay last format for that. Here with a more targeted metagame, I wonder if it's better than Needy G in like any position. Is this the card that places barrier? I don't think so. It's nice this is never really dead. You can put this in any matchup and it'll be live, and it gives Thrust more meaning. It's an okay card, so I'm not going to put this in a card I'd avoid, but like Mistake and Arrest, not a card I'm really eager to put in my deck either right now. Then in terms of going first cards, we got all the counter traps. I'm including just Judgment Fee here. I think these are one of the best side deck cards right now, as people are focusing on some breakers and such to beat field, like Double Cyclone, Dark Luna more, and they're trying to string together multi-card combinations to win. And be able to stop any one card in their combination can ruin their gameplay. We've seen the Dragon Mind end games in Dracotel, and I think Judgment can do the same too. Especially when you're looking for something that's broad for going first, like if you're thinking about Fenrir. I think a counter trap like Judgment just does the job significantly better. Next up, we've got the good old continuous Floodgates, the cards that don't leave the field. So Ravia of the Warlords right now is a card that is just an okay side deck staple. Not fantastic with Dracotel, play aroundable and yummy. It has uses, it can be used for hybrid decks decently, and it's not a dead card because you can pop with Croaky. You can pop it with Urgula. Not a card I'd really be rushing to include, although it's still Broken Floodgate. So goes and match is similar. I feel like there are too many ways to just go around it. I mean, again, with Croaky, and depending on how Dracotel starts, it's not the hardest to deal with it. So I would say avoid it. The rest of the Floodgates are the ones that call my attention more. The Chameleon one, I think, is one of the better choices here because of how it impacts versus Yummy and Mitsurugi cards, where it can force them to essentially do nothing under those. Dracotel, though, they will kind of not do anything either. So yeah. Skill Drain, also a good example of a powerful card. I know it can be hard to deal with the strong Mitsurugi cards under Skill Drain, but being able to shut down the Yummy cards is nice. A lot of decks will also struggle into Skill Drain. Very powerful card, so I think it's worth including if you can fit it. The last up and most impactful, I think, is Dimensional Fissure. As a Dracotel player, this card scares me a lot because it's really good at forcing through draw, importantly. It also beats things like Fimena and Izuna, but then when it gets back to my turn, after doing all that, I now have to deal with a Floodgate. A Floodgate that does really hurt the strategy. There is one Floodgate to play that beats Dracotel. It's Dimensional Fissure, because even going second, it's pretty useful, where it makes 5 mana way more awkward, and I have to sort of Dracotel flame it, as well as if it gets into a grind game, I can't actually grind well into the defissure. It's an interesting card that I think I'd love to see banned, but is very powerful right now, and it's something you should be paying a lot of attention to. If you can play it, you probably should. But okay, guys, this rounds out the staple tier list for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and let me know if you have any opinions on any of my decisions here. This is the thought process I went around when building my deck for YCS Pittsburgh, as well as it's how I built my deck for Bologna, which when it happened just the weekend, hopefully it has some good results there. And it's all these things I'm kind of factoring in, judging the formats and its current place in time. Now keep in mind that some of the choices on here were conditional placements like this Bell, Meows, and Drolls, and you'll move them around on the tier list depending on which deck is more prevalent at the time. So pay attention to the reasoning behind placements, not just the placements themselves. That's why I try and be thorough on these, and why I also tried cutting down this one to be shorter, because I want to be thorough without boring your guys' ears off. I want to find that sweet spot. So let me know how I did in that regard, because I want to make these as impactful as possible so you guys can learn. That is the idea behind these. I really am trying to teach, and I don't want to do a bad job. That being said, I'll see you all next time, and good luck to anybody going to YCS Mexico this weekend, or the remote to YCS and NA the week after. Peace.